2024 is set to be a very busy year in the world of politics. It will culminate in the 60th US presidential election, which takes place on November the 5th.
And despite the many ongoing cases against him, Donald Trump, of course, is widely tipped to win the Republican nomination as he seeks a return to the White House, meaning a Trump-Biden rematch is very much on the cards.
Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis has said that he would pardon Donald Trump if he beats the former president to the White House, citing President Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974.
Here to talk us through all the runners and riders is Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Are we nailed on for a Trump-Biden rematch? I mean, this situation with Colorado and Maine maybe puts a spanner in the works. So should we establish, first of all, if Trump is going to make the national ballot?
It looks like Trump for now. And I think Biden less likely, because I think when we get to June or July, when the conventions start, I think the Democrats will look at the polls, and if Trump is polling comfortably ahead of Biden, which he is right now, then I think they'll pull Biden. They'll do the Bernie Sanders trick on him.
So who would replace Biden? Gavin Newsom, or there's been some talk maybe even Michelle Obama could be...
I've heard both. I think Michelle Obama obviously has name recognition, and I think she'd be a great target for the right. I think Newsom would be a better candidate in terms of his governing experience, although he's governing California, which he's doing his best to run California into the ground. So I think he'd be a good opponent for the Republicans. So it's really a question of who's got the name recognition, but also who's got an organization. But this is not going to be like 1968, where LBJ bailed out in March of '68 because he didn't do as well in New Hampshire as people expected. It was a different process back then. Only 13 states actually had primaries that mattered. Now it's basically all 50 states. So there's just no time for a proper process. So I think the Democrats will wait until the summer to pull Biden.
I'm fascinated by this relationship between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump because, of course, Ron DeSantis wants to beat Donald Trump to be on the ticket, but of course he can't say anything too bad about him because the Trump fans are so loyal to Trump. They need to know that Ron DeSantis is one of them. Is that why he's come out and said he'd pardon them?
It really is. He's in a tough spot because his supporters are very similar to Trump's supporters. So it's the same type of electorate. The never-Trumpers and the rhinos and the moderates, they're going for Nikki Haley or even Chris Christie. Whereas, Governor DeSantis is trying to get the same audience that Trump has. So it's a delicate balance. It's hard. And basically, Ben, you mentioned Trump is leading the charge in spite of the indictments. It's actually because of the indictments.
Galvanizes them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they were basically tied in March of last year. So in March of 22, CNN had DeSantis up 2 points over Trump. In the other polls, they were around tied or maybe Trump by 5 or 10. That's a small margin that early in a primary process. Once the indictments started, Alvin Bragg, last March, April, 4 indictments, the mugshot, and now you have these states trying to, which is pretty reckless. They know it's not going to work. First of all, it's Maine and Colorado. Who cares? There's not that many elections or not electoral votes there. But also, then the big states have actually supported his name on the ballot, notably California, but even the big upper Midwestern states. So this is not going to work. If anything, it's elevating Trump, again, just like the indictments. Well, they want Trump to be the candidate.
Yeah, even Trump's fiercest rivals in the race for the Republican nomination, Chris Christie, who you mentioned, they've come out and said this is just an affront to democracy. So really even they're on his back, got his back. Really with DeSantis, very quickly, he could do no wrong a year or so ago. Did he make a mistake by running in this election? Shouldn't he have just waited and become, the 2028 nominee? Or...
It's a great question, but I think he had to run this time for 2 reasons. One is he's got political capital. I mean, to have that kind of midterm electoral victory in November of 22 and not run with that kind of momentum, it would be really political malpractice. Secondly, Trump is very vulnerable. We don't know what is going to happen to Trump. So I think being even number 2 is important because anything could happen. He's 78 years old. He could trip and fall. Yeah. He could go to jail. He could actually start to lose some support if he gets some convictions. I think a quarter of Republicans won't vote for him. So there's some real challenges.
What would a Trump presidency mean for the UK if and when we have a Labour government? How would he work with?
I think it would be better than the Biden administration, that's for sure. Remember, Trump is a supporter and a fan of the United Kingdom. He had a very good relationship with the country Biden has done his best to sever that relationship. As we know, Biden is much more favorable to the EU, to Ireland specifically.
He thinks he's Irish, doesn't he?
He's got a chip on his shoulder, which is kind of odd.
Wait, who knows what he thinks? I don't think he thinks the same thought any hour of any day, does he? How's Robert Kennedy doing? Independent candidate now, potentially could massively split the vote.
Absolutely, Bev, because this is the first time maybe since 92 when Ross Perot took 20% of the vote. First time since 92 where you have a meaningful third-party candidate. Now, usually they play spoiler by winning 2 or 3% of the vote. That can make a difference. Like Ralph Nader in 2000, basically gave George W. Bush the election by getting just 2 or 3 points in Florida. But if you look at most of the time, third-party candidates just don't move the needle. This could be different, especially given how unpopular both Biden and Trump are. They both have 15-point negative ratings. They're both polling around 40 in terms of favorables. That's really bad news. 75% of Americans don't want them to be the candidates.
And the interesting thing about Robert Kennedy, of course, is that he was traditionally a Democrat, obviously, but they don't want him because he's been so anti-lockdown, pro-freedom, which very much appeals to the right. So he really does appeal to both demographics.
Absolutely.
Doesn't
He might pull as many voters away from Trump as he does Biden.
Yeah.
The Democrats hate him because the Democrats are the party of lockdown. They're the party of vax mandates and mask mandates and keeping kids home from school.
Everything that he opposes.
He had no chance in the Democratic primaries because the inner circle really despises him, even if some of the people like him.
Did you wake up this morning, Greg, and go, yay, it's 2024, we're going to have an American election this year?
It's going to be a huge year, as we know.
I did.
I mean, elections everywhere. 49% of the world residents are going to be in a country with an election. I think the U.S. will probably be the most controversial, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely.